bonjour, bienvenue, guten Tag.
Bonjour.
This is Verena Wieditz. She is part of the legal team at Apple Original Films. And I'm very, very honored to have her here today because she's one of our esteemed members, and she's got a enormous background in international law that started. I'm going to let you talk all about yourself.
Thank you, Kayvon. Well, thank you so much for having me today. I've been, a big fan of PWB for years now. So thank you for having me. I'm part of Apple's original content team, and I work on feature films. And as you know, production nowadays is inherently international. So we produce all over the world. And I try and integrate my international background in as many ways as I can, both, on production and then.
And let's go ahead and say that all opinions and thoughts that you have today are strictly yours. And
correct.
Since we're both lawyers, we have to make sure that we let our audience know that these are all opinions and that you're sharing with us based on your own personal experiences for all the years that you've been a great entertainment lawyer and an IP lawyer. Having lived in Germany, France,
Japan.
U.S., Japan, tell us more a little bit about your background before we jump in, because there's so many subject matters that are so relevant in today's world of independent and studio filmmaking that we want to kind of explore those in a way that's most important for our audience.
Thank you, Kevin. That's so true. So I'm originally German. My parents are both German, but I moved around the world a lot. I spent my childhood in Tokyo, and I also, I came to the U.S. as a teenager. I moved to France as an adult, spent 7 years in Paris, and also spent some time in Switzerland. So I've moved around a lot, and I think that perspective has really shaped kind of the way I approach legal problems and just problems in general. I think production in particular is something that's inherently cross-border these days. And I think understanding different legal systems and different cultures, there's nothing more valuable than understanding a different culture, just as a takeaway in life, I would say.
Which brings me to something really interesting, because years ago I did this seminar during the Cannes Film Festival called Deliver or Die. And it was about chain of title problems.
Sounds dramatic.
And it was about chain of title problems and how different productions internationally were treating the issue of how to protect IP rights, so that when it gets to a distributor, the distributor can release the film and not have any issues come up. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about how that is so important, of course, in the studio world, because if you want to get massive distribution, all the nuts and bolts and all the I's that need to be dotted and the T's that need to be crossed go through such an incredibly exhaustive process. Whereas with independent films, sometimes they forget, I didn't get that release, and all of a sudden, you've cut yourself out of a territory. So just can you compare and contrast for us the process where you have to go through on a studio level and having a background in the independent world, how that it differs from that.
I love this subject because I think there's nothing more stressful for an independent film producer to be finished. You're wrapped, you have this amazing film, but no one's going to distribute it because you don't have the rights to the underlying IP, right? And sometimes you can remedy issues of chain of title, but sometimes you can't. What if your competitor went and swooped up the rights and now you can't distribute? I think that's probably the most stressful thing for any independent film producer. And I witnessed this a little bit when I was with the law firm, right? So you try and cut costs any way possible as an independent film producer. And often if acquiring certain rights isn't going to be part of your plan, right? Because you're trying to make it work with the budget you have. And that's a big difference towards studios, because studios, if you don't have rights, it's sort of the opposite approach. If you don't have rights or you can't acquire the rights, you're not going to move forward with a project. Obviously, there are certain ways that you can remedy issues later down the road. If you've acquired something, right, from one person and then they actually had the rights from another party. Sometimes there are issues with chain of title, but often they can be corrected, but not always, right? And I've seen this with independent film producers, and this is something culturally also, and it's interesting, we talked about it earlier, that some cultures don't have this, it's not as buttoned up. Just culturally, it's not. Like certain countries don't have written contracts. Like Japan, for instance, is a country where like handshake deals are still very much accepted, or the Middle East, like written contracts don't have the same value as they do in the United States. So for international distribution purposes, that's going to be challenging, right? Even if you're technically buttoned up in that country, it's not going to work for purposes of distribution worldwide. And that's what you're always aiming for, right? As a
right.
producer.
I mean, for example, let's say you go out and you're shooting something and the the savannah in Africa.
Yeah.
And you're going and it's a documentary and it's something really important. And, you can't go and put a piece of paper in front of somebody and say, sign this because, I want your rights in perpetuity. They're going to look at you like, no.
Yeah, they might not be able to read English, right? Like it's not customary, right?
It's not customary.
Yeah, it's totally not.
Culturally, it could be. I mean, they're all. Everybody's so plugged in now. They're very intelligent. Culturally, they may feel like, well, I don't know if what I'm signing here is something that I can trust you with.
Right. Exactly.
So that becomes an issue too. And I want to kind of talk about how does that impact something where you're trying to, as you said, as an independent producer, you're trying to get the project off the ground, and sometimes you do have to cut that corner. But when it comes to the studio world, I want to know how the studios approach it.
Yeah, I think that this is a really interesting topic because I think that studios will veer away from situations like that. If especially American studios, if you know from the onset you're filming in the savannah and it's not going to be possible to get rights to something, you're not going to film there, right? I think this is where education is super important, and also having people who have international experience, right? Who are like, okay, you might not be able to get a signed contract from this tribe, but you can do something else, right? So having a local partner, and this is where PWB comes into place, right? Is that having a local partner who knows the customs and can help jump in is so invaluable. I can't stress this enough. And again, we're inherently global. I think the days where you're just filming everything in a studio, those have been over for a while. So having a partner in a different country who can walk you through that is necessary. So yeah.
Another thing that comes to my mind is music rights. And, if you can distinguish between like sync rights, master use rights, and all those rights that are very important when it comes to attaching music to your film, in the independent world versus the studio world. And I say all this to you because I know in the studio worlds, they have entire teams and departments and stuff set up for this stuff. So it's not really that much of a difficult thing to explain. But in the independent world, as you said, unless you have a producer that understands that and is able to articulate the importance of having these things all buttoned up before your project moves forward and having a good, strong legal team on board. I always, correct me if I'm wrong, I always tell people, like, don't skimp out on your legal team.
Yes.
When you're putting on an independent film. If it's so important to have that legal team on board. So I want you to speak more about that.
I love that too, because that's also something that's often, a cost that as an independent producer you don't want to spend, right? A lawyer is expensive. But there's nothing more destructive for an independent film producer. Music is another good example. It's something that you're not going to have money left over for music unless you budget it, right? One thing I used to advise independent clients was, if you can hire a composer, that's great, because music is extremely complicated. We could do a whole podcast on just like sync rights, on the different licenses, right? Recording, like the different royalties, right? How the pools work. It's a very complex subject, but also very interesting. But if you have a composer, it's a little bit more clean, right? They're composing for you. It's you can. But again, it's money you have to budget for that. So if you don't think about that from the onset, and that's what I always advise independent, or what I would advise independent clients is, like, make sure that even though it's kind of painful to have to do that, partner with someone who really knows production, and ideally like a production lawyer who's done this, who can kind of see around the corners and tell you, okay, you might save costs now, but you're opening yourself to litigation after, or even worse, a distributor who's not going to pick up your film. And it would be terrible if you have to, in ADR after, strip the music out of it, right? Like, music is as important to a film as the actor. It really can make or break a film. So you don't want to afterwards have to spend all this money on post-production to take something out again. Yeah.
So I want to also talk about distribution deals and how the kind of rights studios have as opposed to in the independent world, where they're trying to sell off territory by territory to get the most most bang, so to speak, for their buck when it comes down to the revenue generation of their project, whether it's trying to do the pre-sales and sell by territory. So can you walk me through that? What your experiences are with that?
Well, so I can say that for streamers, you don't actually encounter that, right? I think that's kind of the traditional model versus like new streaming models. I don't want to say that the traditional model is dead by any means, right? It's still very much alive. For independent film producers, I think that's still the route you go. It's kind of the choice you make, right? Like, do you want to commit to a streamer if you have the opportunity, or do you want to try and sell sell geo by geo, knowing that financially it could be more interesting, right? So I think do you prefer security? Because with a streamer, I think, and it depends on which one, right? But you might have like a lump sum of money coming in, which I mean, for most like indie producers is great. But you could potentially have more if you're going geo by geo, but it's going to be more work, right? And you always have the risk that like you might get one geo and not another. So I think the risk analysis is different. And also you might be able to hold on to certain rights if you're going geo by geo versus if you're selling to a streamer, you're going to have less like room to negotiate. And I think that it always depends on like what kind of level producer you are, what experience you have, who you are, and what your relationship with them is. But I think in general, it's a safe thing to say that you're going to be probably giving up a few more rights. Yeah.
Okay. Now you've worked on SAG New Media, a project and feature films intended for the big screen.
Yeah.
What are the practical differences that you've encountered?
You mean specifically a film that's meant for the screen versus streaming?
Exactly.
So you're definitely dealing with other union issues, right? Because SAG has a distinction if there's a theatrical release or not. So you're kind of, the way you set up the project is a little bit different. And that's again where it's interesting if you're sort of like an indie filmmaker who's just making it, right? And then it ends up just by coincidence is going to a festival. It's like, it gets a big distribution deal versus was that your intent from the get-go? Mm-hmm. And I think that's where if you're working in a studio, you're approaching it, like your framework is different because you're already envisioning the finished product because there's generally no issue with financing, right? Because the financing is set from the beginning. But I think that's really different with an indie film producer because sometimes you have financing from the get-go and that's great. But the way you're framing it, it is very different, right? If you know in a studio setting, the financing's not an issue versus it will be. But being properly set up with the unions is very crucial. So again, I think when you're partnering with someone who has that experience with SAG, with the DGA, it's super, super valuable because that's a skill set on its own, knowing the different contracts, right? Knowing what actors are owed, the different breaks, right? Like the holidays, like that. That's a I would say valuable experience to have.
Tell me about your experiences working, for example, on because you've worked on some very, very major films like Once Upon a Time, and the whole process and some of the challenges that you face when you're dealing with something so big.
Oh, there's tons.
No, I know. I just want to kind of get an example because a lot of times when people talk about, I'm going to try to do something like that myself.
Yeah.
But you can't do that yourself without having the right kind of team in place. So my question really is directed towards what kind of team is necessary to make sure that a project, something like that.
Yeah.
Of course, you may not have the budget of something like that, but I want to walk me through the step-by-step type of team that you need necessary on the legal front to handle a project.
I love this question because I think that it's not just on the legal front. I think the word team that you use is so crucial because having a good team is going to make or break a project. And one thing I've learned over the years is why do you kind of gravitate toward the same people over and over again is if you have someone that you really enjoyed working with who's kind of a rock star, you're going to want to work with that person again just because this industry, right? Like it attracts different backgrounds and it attracts a little bit of everything, right? As you know. So if you have someone who's amazing, you're going to want to work with them again. So creating that all-star team from the beginning, that's what's going to make or break it, right? Like having your line producer who's amazing, right? Like having your producer, having, the costume designer, right? Like having all your department heads who are stellar and then trusting them to hire people underneath them, right? To help them with the costumes or the set designers, right? That is what's going to make or break it. So I can't stress that enough. It's like from the get-go to not cut corners, to really make sure it's a good fit.
And a lot of that has to do with your personal relationships over the years with people like that. And knowing how they've performed under pressure in certain types of things, not just studio stuff, but more, with an independent, they're trying to get as close to studio quality as they can.
Yes, yeah.
And now with the ways of shooting things so cheaply, so inexpensively, you can have the look, but you still need the team.
Yes.
Like I recently saw a film called Left-Handed Girl.
Okay.
Beautiful film. Absolutely beautiful film. And it was all shot on an iPhone.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And I was amazed at the fact that somebody who has a story and is not restricted by the fact that they don't have expensive equipment and expensive things available to them to make it and give it that gloss, can tell such a beautiful story. And so a lot of times I think in this world where everybody's kind of shifting towards the creator economy and everybody's doing stuff where they're trying to compete, with larger scale productions, what we're realizing more and more is story is everything. I know, and it sounds so cliche, and I know that a lot of people say it, but I think that as we progress and we move forward into the future, as you see right now with a lot of the AI generated content that's out there and how it's becoming so dilutive in the world of content creation, like we call that content creation. People are saying, well, I don't want to call it content. I want to call it film. I want to call it, a story, something that's meaningful. But as long as it resonates, as long as it makes you think and it makes you feel and it pulls you in, you have the ability to tell a story that is meaningful with people who in your audience group are going to really grab onto it and use it as a method of sending it to their friends and so on, and the viral nature of that. Whereas, in the studio world, you have to go and spend marketing campaigns. Everything has to be tested. So let's go through that process.
I love that because I think one really integral notion that resonated with me when you were saying this is with studios, I think one trade-off is, you have a certain degree of security, right? But as an indie film producer, you have freedom, right? So everything that you just said was storytelling, right? Like you have a bit more freedom of like picking the people. You don't have the constraints that you might have in a studio setting of having to do X, Y, Z because it says so in the production manual, because so-and-so said, right? Like you're generally dealing with smaller teams, right? So you have a bit more freedom. And I think to your point, we're dealing with so many interesting things in our just in our ecosystem, right? Like AI has a huge role these days, and it's in every conversation, right? And I'm sure we're gravitating to that direction too. But the quality of the story, I think we're all thirsty for great stories, and I think that's not changing, right? So just and sharing that, whether it's you shot it on your iPhone, like a great film doesn't have to be a $300 million film. A great story can be shot on an iPhone, right? It just depends.
You're seeing more and more of that happening because the democratization of that,
100%,
of filmmaking is something that's very, very refreshing, and it opens up a whole world of storytelling, especially internationally and globally, where it doesn't matter what language it's in. It doesn't matter if it's subtitled. If you, I keep saying this, if it makes you think and it makes you feel, it's real art, because that's what people want to see. They want to see an authenticity. They want to see something that makes them want to engage on a one-on-one basis with the characters in that film. To the point that they're going to invest their time in watching it. That's what I was really getting at. Now, the fact that you come from the independent world as an IP lawyer, which is what entertainment law is really all about. It's about IP. That's the foundation of it. And then from there, gravitating towards the studio world. What are some of the skills that you learned in the independent world that have been very beneficial to you in the studio world?
That's a great question. I think that it's everything has been useful in different ways, like actually learning the craft itself, right? Like what does a line producer really do, right? I feel like that was something coming from a firm. I was like, okay, like here I have like negotiated all these like high level deals, but actually seeing, working with line producers or working with independent producers and seeing what a line producer does every day, right? Kind of seeing how these different, sort of nebulous definitions like a UPM, right? Like what do they actually do? That's been super helpful because I still find myself negotiating deals. So seeing how the whole project comes together has been super helpful, because then I think one of the things I'm expected to do is to see around the corners and see what legal issues might happen, right? And so we talked about chain of title, but there's so many other issues, right, that can happen.
It's like
reputational, right? Like you make a film about someone and then the family sees it and it's like, well, I don't agree with that portrayal, right? Like we had it with the Foot Locker litigation, so that this was years ago, but something like that can happen. So you're sort of always looking around the corners to make sure that, okay, well, is there a way we can integrate this family and get their input? So that's something that, in my current role, I would, particularly, would consider. There's thousands of issues that can arise, whether it's, chain of title, again, to bring it up at permits, for instance, right? Like, did you actually obtain all the permits you need to film at that particular location? Or all the agreements buttoned up?
Or have something in the background that shows, and then it's like...
That's true, like trademarks, right? Yeah. Like, there's often, generally in studios, like whole teams that just do clearances, right? To make sure logos are cleared, trademarks are cleared, references are cleared, right? Because again, the last thing you want a distributor is to look at your film and be like, well, no, like you have to recut this whole thing because that video clip that was like an ad from Nike that you didn't clear.
Right. So now let's talk about the indie world where it's like they don't even think about any of that stuff.
Often they don't, right?
They often don't, and they slap it up on a YouTube channel or TikTok and it just, fire away, and they have 2 million, 3 million viewers.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, more people are watching that than anybody that you're worried about as a on a legal team is watching something that maybe a couple 100,000 people end up watching, but the whole process could be so cumbersome. It could be so expensive because you have to go through
It's very expensive. Yes.
It's very expensive. So,
and I always say it kind of depends, right? Because like for big studios, you inherently have a target on your back because it is big studio equals, right? Potentially an interesting.
But what I'm asking you now is, do you think independents will have a target on their back, and all of a sudden, you have 3 million, 4 million viewers on your TikTok channel?
Totally. And I've seen this to a certain degree also when I've worked at Vox Media. I think that YouTube totally, like you're a content creator, you post on YouTube, you're not immune from lawsuits, right? Like I handled cease and desist, like different, like there's very aggressive plaintiff lawyers out there that look for just that. And that could be clips, but it could also just be photos, right? Like there's a very active plaintiff photo litigation, movement going on. So I think you have to be alert, even if you're just like a small indie producer, so to speak, right? Yeah. So it's really not anywhere you want to cut corners.
Right. And I think to me, most important thing is, what are the thresholds for that? I mean, at what point? I mean, at what point do you think there is a point where it gets too much? Like you become overly litigious because overly
cautious.
Overly cautious or overly. I mean, it's all balancing game anyway.
It's totally a balancing game. Because sometimes you have to lean into risk, right? Like even studios that are super, super risk averse and you want everything to be perfect and buttoned up.
Then you'll never get anything.
You're never going to get anything done.
What I'm saying to you is, right now the floodgates have opened, because I remember when we were doing things in the past, you had to put all these like photo notices around a party and stuff. You don't see any of that anywhere anymore because the whole
sometimes
what I'm saying is you because everywhere you go now there's a camera
and people's iPhones, right?
So,
like everyone's filming.
I'm saying, so you have no right to privacy anymore.
That's
like,
right.
Whenever you're in a setting,
public setting,
or even when you go to a private party, because people are all
posting on
their phones and they're posting constantly.
So true. So that's totally changed.
And that's changed the expectation of privacy.
Yeah.
Which is another thing I want to talk about is how we deal with privacy issues in from a studio standpoint and an indie. Well, in the indie world, you feel like there is no privacy anymore because it's like I'm just speaking practically.
I think you're so right.
Because once again, they come from that world where they're posting stuff on their phone. They're making a movie on their iPhone.
Oh yeah, totally.
So if you're making a movie on your iPhone, okay, well obviously you're using that phone for many other things too. Right?
Sure.
Whereas in the studio world, no phones on set. Everything's got to be off.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because it's such a controlled environment.
Yeah. And I think to your point, it's like...
It is such a controlled environment because they don't want to have HR calling somebody down and say, hey, you didn't take care of this.
Right. But vice versa, right? I think, and that's where you kind of have to lean into trends too. Is like if you're depriving like your talent, like you can only control people to a certain degree, right? Because even if it's in line with your policies, at some point you might have to revisit your policies because everyone has a phone on them, right? Like you can say like no filming on set, et cetera, but I think that you just have to at some point, and this is like an overall trend too. You have to lean into risk, right? Yeah. And I think that's really what production is about, and that's what a person who really understands production is going to be a good partner for you because like there's only so many things you can control, and at some point you have to embrace risk because otherwise you're not going to get anything done. There are going to be situations where you won't be able to clear a clip, you won't be able to clear something.
I think it all comes down. Just correct me if I'm wrong. It's all about money. I mean, how much money?
It can, but sometimes you're not able to find. What I'm saying is,
how much are you going to spend in trying to defend or prosecute something in a way that's going to, at some point, is going to be cost prohibitive towards the final result.
Oh, totally, right.
Which brings
for that
me
reason,
to, for example, let's talk about arbitration versus litigation.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have some experience in arbitration, actually. Right. That's when out of law school, I was practicing in international arbitration. So the advantages traditionally of arbitration are that they're confidential, right? I wouldn't say it's less expensive to arbitrate. It can be quicker because litigation, as we both know, it's very, very slow, but it's also expensive. And honestly, it's generally in no one's interest to litigate, right? Unless there are certain instances where it can be advantageous or trying to make a point, right? And sometimes in entertainment, you have that because you're dealing with big personas, right? They want to make a point, and sometimes they do have deep pockets. They're like, you know what, Studio X, I'm gonna take this to court, right? This is a big point for me. So you do see that every now and then. I think generally it's not in your interest. It's really in no one's interest. So I think that generally arbitration is more advantageous in the sense that it is quicker and it's confidential. So for independent film producers, I would always advise to put arbitration clauses into their agreements, just because you don't want you don't want your project stuck in court, and then you're really going to lose all distribution deals, right?
Yeah. Okay. And so, what are some of the most common legal disputes that keep reoccurring in your line of work? The thing that always comes up the most, where you feel like, gosh, when are they going to learn that, hey, we shouldn't do this or they shouldn't do that? Well, I just want to see from your perspective, what are the things that you see the most?
So this is not something I'm currently across, but I've spoken with someone about it. I think that there's definitely a trend in like idea theft cases going on, where like someone makes a movie, or someone makes a movie, and then someone else is like, wait, that was my idea, right? So
if it's not fixed in a tangible form, it becomes a very, very difficult thing to
100%, right? Because everyone's entitled to making ideas, but then they'll be like, oh, well, here's the proof of an email. So there's like a nebulous proof of concept somewhere, but they're like, okay, why? And I told him, right? So these are kind of like very exotic disputes, but I feel like there's a lot of them right now.
And I think because you work for a studio, that's probably where, because as you said before, you have a huge target on your back.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so you would never see that if I'm going to be releasing something on YouTube.
Right, no. I'd be like, okay, this guy.
Well, the next thing I knew, I made a quick film out of it in 5 minutes. Right. And then next thing you know, it's on YouTube.
And so I think for that reason, you'll see that studios don't take unsolicited submissions because they don't want, so that all has a reason.
That totally makes sense.
Totally. And it's for that reason. So that you can't say, well, listen, I emailed it to you and, you obviously saw it, right? So like most studios are very clear about that. It's like, we're not even going to look at anything. I think, many, and there was a litigation about this years ago. Many studios are very firm on that. So
what are your thoughts about this rising microdrama world that we're in now? Because one of our colleagues is very big in that sector of the entertainment business, and she's become very, very successful at it. And the prolific use of the proliferation of this type of content, and how quickly it's produced and put out there and consumed and monetized so quickly.
Fascinating.
It's fascinating. Have you come across anything where in your world you're like, okay, I can spot that issue right now, and I think if they have a legal team basically on the set, that would be beneficial for them. For this, and this.
That's a great question, because just to go back to the microdramas,
because what I'm saying is because they put them up so quickly that it's like, okay, I don't have time to do this, and this, and this. Yeah. So they go by a formula. Here's somebody. The lawyer gives them a sheet. You have to make sure. Yeah. This, and this, and that. But a lot of times when you do those things so quickly,
you don't have time. Yeah.
You don't have time. So doesn't it behoove them to have somebody on set, on the legal team?
Oh yeah.
That's my whole point is if you were to start your own little mini studio. Of doing microdramas, wouldn't you want to have somebody like that on the set? I
would totally,
because you put that in the budget. Put a line item in the budget for that. A legal team, somebody on the set all the time.
That would be, and I did that a little bit when I was at Vox, right? Like I saw, and it's hugely, if you can afford that, it's hugely valuable, I would say.
My point on that is because we're both lawyers, but it's like you can't afford not to have somebody like that. If that's what you're doing, and you're going to monetize something, anything where it has a chance to be monetized in a way that somebody can see, oh, I'm going to make money off of that if I, because there's a lot of, let's just say, attorneys that aren't so, they're looking for those opportunities. Yeah. To create.
And I think there's definitely a lot there 100% are. And if you can have that, because so many interesting issues arise. So I don't know if it's specific to microdramas. I'd argue that it's specific to any production if you can have someone there full time. But microdramas are unique because they're so short,
the pace.
right?
I mean, for me, the reason I even thought about this to bring this up to you is because I know you're dealing with much larger things. But having an independent background and seeing how the independent filmmaking world is moving and shifting, one, not just the fact that it's being slapped up on the YouTubes and the TikToks and the streaming world, but also the change in format.
Yes,
and the change in format is also presenting something else too, because the framing is totally different, the sets are different, the pacing is different, and the fact that the way the things are recorded are different.
It's so different, right?
One of our colleagues, and it moves so fast.
It's so fast
that because they're doing multiple projects at one time, that 6 to 8 days to shoot something.
Yeah.
170, 190,000 bucks per project, you know, all non-union. I mean, it moves so fast. So at some point you're like, well, shouldn't we have somebody over here just in case?
Just in case. Yeah.
I
would argue yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And on top of that, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, if this is going, if it's shifting in this direction, where do I see it going after this?
Yeah. That's an amazing question. Where do I see it going after this? I think that we're going to see more of that, right? Like more.
So let me tell you where it's going, because I was about to, because I want to get your thoughts about this also. So, because I don't know, okay, let me just break out the scenario for you. You're working, you know, I don't know, ungodly number of hours a day because you don't have the restriction of the labor union time frames.
Right. Which are very
so
strict.
So they're very strict. So somebody is in this town. They don't have a job. They've pulled somebody off of the internet.
Yeah.
They're based on their followers. So they have 2 million followers.
Okay,
You're an actor. You're an actress.
Cool.
Let's go. Let's use you.
Sure.
I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars, and I'm going to Venmo the money to you at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go through the agent. You don't have to go through a manager. You get your money right away. It's a trusted producer.
You save like 3 months of negotiations.
All that stuff. It moves very, very fast, right?
Yeah.
And it moves so fast that at some point you are exhausted as a producer. Because you're doing multiple things. You're like, you know what? I'm going to drop in an AI. I'm going to shoot this scene that I don't have time for in AI.
But okay.
So when you replace an entire scene with something that's AI, and nobody's going to know because it's all the stuff that you're collecting, all the data that you're collecting from that actor, from their because they sign these releases, right?
Yeah,
so think about the releases now. What the releases say. You're giving me the right to your voice. You're giving me the right to your image. You're giving me a right to
perpetual worldwide.
I can at any time go back and fix that and add things in there later. Matter of fact, I can create a whole new drama series based on something that was successful before and don't have to pay you anymore because there's no union there to protect you.
But is it ethical?
Forget about ethical. We're talking about money, and you're now living in a world where that's what's happening. And what I'm saying it's happening is because when that happens, and let's say, for example, not even an example today. For the sake of argument, 100% of the films that you see out there are man-made, female. I'm not saying gender.
Human-made,
So they're human-made. And so when they're human-made, and now you see the proliferation of, for example, the latest drama right now is with Seed Dance. And you saw the Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise thing, which was phenomenally, it's alarming how good it was. The quality was shocking. And this is now, I think 3 years from now, how that's going to be. If there's no guardrails on this thing, and the actors don't even matter anymore because the production values are so stunning that somebody with a thought and a prompt can create a world. Now, when we finish, so if you're saying 100% of the films today are human made, 3 years from now, 70% or 60%. Think about 30 or 40% of that getting sucked out of the entertainment business now. I mean, the entertainment business is already challenged. For lack of a better word. And because it's challenged, it freaks people out. That creates mental issues. That creates anxiety issues. That creates all sorts of other things that precipitate from this world because somebody a long time ago said, hey, you're not gifted enough. You're not talented enough. You don't have the skills to be a cinematographer, a director, or
an actor.
Anything.
Right.
So you were shut out and somebody shunned you. So what do? You hold yourself up in a basement somewhere. You come up with code and you create that world like a video game maker. But now it's so good.
Yeah.
Because the advancements of chip technology, the technology companies have gone so far. All of these things are pregnant with legal issues that people in the entertainment industry haven't really realized how to address them. And as a studio, for example, that you represent a studio that's one of the top it's like I don't know anybody in the ecosystem that doesn't use your studio's devices, including myself. They are. I mean, they're amazing. 100%. I mean, it's like Apple diehard.
I'm not paid to say that.
I can say that. I'm an Apple diehard, and I'm not saying that because of any other reason, because you see the quality is so good. And it's because of the quality is so good that it's creating these kind of opportunities, right?
Yeah, totally.
So in other words, everything is so inextricably intertwined that to unwind all this stuff and try to create legal challenges for pro, con, or whatever becomes this Pandora's box, so to speak, of how do you want to pull one thread without realizing that thread was actually woven by the same person who gave you that thread.
Right, yeah.
Right? So, there is a question here. I'm sorry.
Okay. I was going to have so many things to say.
Okay, so go ahead and say it. This is a conversation, so I don't want to.
This is fascinating because, like, there's definitely no shortage of legal issues now or in the future. I think one thing that's going to be interesting, because one thing you said resonated with me in terms of, replacing scenes, like having one all authentic content and then one like AI scene. I think that will ultimately dilute the quality, because I think one thing that's like, in a way, this kind of goes back to economics, like supply and demand. I think consumers at some point will be more like, there'll just be higher, like it'll be labeled higher quality content if it's human made, right? I think there will be a distinction between like AI content and human content. I think that the demand for human content will always be there.
Okay, so this is a brilliant thing that you're leading me into, because I've been trying to study this as much as I can and educate myself. So bear with me, because according to the pace at which we're going, you're going to get to a place where there's going to be technological singularity, and that's that moment where artificial intelligence will surpass human intelligence after they merge at a certain point. And there's a nexus where humans will be connected with devices that are going to make them like supercomputers. Or neural networks will be connected to the cloud, where things. I can sit here and imagine an entire movie. Look at a white wall, and the entire movie will play on that wall.
Yeah,
right, because it's all connected now. Right. You no longer need the device that your company makes, which we're all relying on, because
it'll all be microchip powered.
Well, what I'm saying is they'll advance to that level too. Because if there's an opportunity and there's a thought process behind it, somebody's thinking of it and doing that, and at that point, creativity takes on a new meaning, and the legal challenges that come about at that point. Are they going to be moot? Because who cares about rights and copyright and this and that? Because it's a thought then.
Right.
Is it fixed in a tangible form?
So you're talking about projecting a thought onto a screen?
Exactly. Right. Yeah, because that's what it's going to come down to. I won't even have to prompt it, Verena. Because and then what are the Oscars going to be like in like 4 or 5 years? And the best prompt goes to we'll see. Right? I mean, I would argue. I personally think that I don't think it's not going to be quite as soon. I personally think that feature film production will continue. Well, 100%.
But I see what you're saying.
I think there's no doubt that the film world will continue. There's still going to be people that need that communal experience of going into a movie theater and watching. Right. There's no doubt that is going to continue. But the monetization of that and the dilutive nature of all these other types of technologies that are going to kind of seep into that world, that are going to take away from the people who've spent an entire career building a craft that they're perfected, and they want to be protected by it somehow, but they can't no longer. Those protections may be moot.
I wouldn't say it's moot, but it's.
What I'm saying is litigating
the thread
it would
is there.
be because the cost. Think about it. I'm thinking pragmatically with lawyers. I mean, there's a cost to litigate something. If you don't have the money to litigate something, you're not going to have a lawyer take you and represent you. They retainer, and then all of a sudden they're going to look at the strengths and weaknesses of your case. They're going to do an assessment and say, okay, in this case, in this scenario, you're better off just settling. I don't want to settle. I want to because something has been taken away from me.
Mm-hmm.
These are the challenges, and so with an independence, that their heart and soul and their life has been put into something. Right, and now somebody's taking that away from them.
Right, but I think it doesn't have to be like that, right? Like I think that there still will be. I see what you're saying. Like the technology, I think it's fascinating.
I know these conversations are just going way off on a philosophical thing, but I wanted to kind of lay these things out. I had, of course, I had a lot of questions about this, but I wanted to make sure that we lay the groundwork for future discussions because these are things that are on the forefront of everyone's imagination and thought that I come across, having being part of PWB and having this multi-professional group of people that are doers and not talkers, and givers and not takers, this esoterical, experiential nature of our group, which you're a part of, you realize that we are always feeding off of other people's information and what's coming to us and their concerns and their backgrounds and where they come from. So I wanted to kind of throw this out there for you, because you are such an important person in the legal world for the studio that you work for, and also the fact that you have that background. I wanted to get your input about these kind of things that I'm bringing up, so that you have something to think about.
I love that, because I think that as much as like artificial intelligence is, taking a big role, I think that the human relationships are going to continue being important. And I would argue probably more important as we move forward. And that's where PWB is all about connectivity. It's all about, it's relationships, it's people, it's how can we help each other. So I think that is just going to be more and more important as the time progresses.
I think unequivocally, and by the way, thank you so much, but because I think the value of that human connectivity is going to actually increase, because as you're more attached to these electronic devices that are going to take away a lot of those skills, so to speak, you're going to feel vacant. Like you don't have somebody that you can talk to as a human, and I mean,
and nothing replaces that.
Nothing replaces that kind of
authentic conversations,
authentic conversation where there's a sense of integrity, there's a sense of loyalty to that person, because you feel their energy one-on-one as you're sitting across from them. Because we're spending so much of our time in front of that digital device, that digital device, not only is it a data suck and taking everything away from you, it's also presenting this traumatic sense of who are you, this existential kind of crisis.
Yes. And I think on that, I think when something, and this is production, but it could also be in someone's personal life. If something runs into some real issue, you can ask like ChatGPT, like, hey, how do I solve this? But when it comes to like real philosophical conundrums, like, hey, should I do this or should this? Like my kid did this, I don't know what to do. You're generally not going to turn to ChatGPT. You're going to want to ask like a real human, like, hey, have you encountered this before? Or like, I had this happen with my line producer. Have you seen that before? Right? The distributor said this. Like, you're going to want like a real human, right? You don't want that question out on the internet, right? Like you just want trust, right?
Look, you've got two little kids, beautiful little kids. And so I'm just thinking about like in 10 years when those kids become teenagers, they're going to know more about everything than you have spent a lifetime educating
Hopefully
yourself.
They can help me.
No, but that's what's happening.
So true. It's so true.
What I'm saying is what's incredible is the how the young people have tools available to them now to become superhuman.
Yeah.
Whereas with us, it took us 20, 30, 40 years to get to a place where we feel like, oh, we're experts in this field.
Right.
Where you're no longer going to be an expert if a kid who's 10 years old has all that information.
It's shifting for sure. Right? New jobs will pop up.
The only thing that will matter is how human you are, how you can feel and see things around the corner and have an intuition and have that ability to have a history that's personal to you and your experiences.
Agree.
That another human can then connect to. Now, I know this sounds a little bit off topic, because what we brought you here is to talk about the legal issues between how a studio handles things and how an independent handles things. But what's important is that you also understand that these are going to come up in your world.
Yeah.
100%. They're because companies of that nature are already, are dealing with this, and it's on the horizon for them too.
Yeah,
it's on the horizon for everyone.
Exactly.
So this is what I'm saying is that this is where I think the world of the democratization of the independent film world, and as it becomes closer to what a studio can create,
right,
it is fascinating, because having that background from India, and now you have this bifocal viewpoint that I think is very relevant, because nobody has been able to see what you've seen.
Right. No, that's true. And I'm excited to, put it into practice, right, in the future.
So give us your 3 takeaways. What are the 3 takeaways? Because we're running out of time.
Okay.
Right now. Give me your 3 takeaways of what you would like to see from your perspective as a lawyer who I'm going to let you take it away.
Well, I think the last one is just it's human connection. I think as much as technology is going to proliferate, I think nothing replaces authentic human connections. And that's through PWB. That's just, that's for me, that's a huge priority. And that's something that's super important to me is authentic, real friendships, like real conversations, people I can talk to and I can trust. So it's also trust. I think trust is, and it kind of ties into the third thing I was going to say, which is team. You're going to want to have a good team for your life, just as a general theme, whether it's your personal life, the kids that you want your kids to play with, your own friends. Like it's really, we're built on, you want to have a solid team when things are going well, when things aren't going well, because there's always going to be a time, whether it's your production, it's your fill in the blank, right? Like there's tough times and there's good times, and we need to have a solid foundation and people we can trust. I think that won't be replaced by technology. Yeah. And then that feeds into the trust, like making sure that there's people who you can talk to openly. I think that nothing can replace that.
Okay, that's. I think is that it?
It's very philosophical. I know. There's so much. Yeah,
there is, but
I think that's so. There's no like. It's never. I think it's never a waste of time to take time to connect with someone authentically. Get coffee with them, have lunch with them, and you're not always going to be able to connect with. And people do change, right? Over time, the same people. I mean, we've known each other for almost 10 years now, right? And you have changed.
Actually, thanks a lot. Actually, 7 years, but okay.
Okay, well, I rounded
like
up.
10.
I aged for 10,
We actually met at the Cannes Film Festival in 2019.
We did meet in Cannes.
As I was about to have an event, and she's like, "What is this?" I'm like, "Well, we're having an event."
He was so snooty. He was like, "Well, this is my event." I was like, "Okay, I'm here for a premiere."
I was not like that at all.
But this is a good example, right? Like we go way back, and hopefully, it's going to evolve. But I'm looking forward to a lot more, PWB events in the future.
Like I said, I appreciate the fact that you took the time, given your important position with the company that you work with, which once again I have a lot of respect for, because the fact that they're such incredible innovators, and the fact that you've given us some of your time today to educate us about the differences of how things are treated in that world and the world that you came from. So thank you very much. Auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you, Keva. Thank you so much for having me, for trusting me. And
she's such a multilingual international lady that
Bis zum nächsten Mal.
Exactly. I'm very, very, very grateful. Thank you so much, Verena. And that's it for this edition of our podcast with Producers Without Borders. Thank you for joining us.